The Mafia boss was halfway out the door when the scream stopped him cold. "Sir, wait!" The maid came running down the hallway, pale, shaking, breathless. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely point. "She put something in the food," the maid cried. "Your wife! She put something in your daughter's food!" The words didn't register at first. Then they did. The boss turned slowly. From the dining room came the soft clink of a spoon against porcelain. His daughter sat at the table, swinging her legs, humming quietly, oblivious. His wife stood behind her, smiling, calm, perfect, loving, too loving. The boss's heart began to pound as memories snapped into place. The missed meals, the unexplained sickness, the nights his daughter cried without pain he could name. He stepped into the room. His wife looked up. Their eyes met, and in that split second, before anyone spoke, he knew this wasn't an accident. This wasn't carelessness. It was something far worse. Stay with me until the end, because what he discovers in that bowl will change the fate of his family forever. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Marco Benedetti ruled the shadows of the city with an iron fist, but when he walked through the doors of his mansion, that fist unclenched. Here, he wasn't the feared Don who could end lives with a phone call. Here, he was simply a father who braided his daughter's hair before school and read bedtime stories in voices that made her giggle. The estate sat on 20 acres of perfectly manicured grounds, surrounded by walls that kept the world out and secrets in. Every flower, every stone, every window had been chosen with purpose. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress built to protect the one thing that mattered more than power, more than money, more than the empire he'd spent 15 years building. His daughter, Sophia. At 8 years old, Sophia had her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn streak. She collected butterflies and asked questions that made grown men uncomfortable. Why do people hurt each other? Why can't everyone just be nice? Questions that Marco answered carefully, honestly, because he'd learned that children could smell lies faster than adults could speak them. But today, something was different. Marco had been heading out for what should have been a routine meeting with his lieutenants when Maria Santos, the head maid who'd worked for his family for 12 years, came running down the marble hallway like death itself was chasing her. Maria had seen things in this house. She'd cleaned bloodstains from marble floors without asking questions. She'd served dinner to men whose names appeared in obituaries the next morning. She'd watched Marco's world from a distance, understanding without ever speaking. Nothing rattled Maria Santos until today. Her face was white as fresh snow, her usual, composed demeanor shattered into pieces. The woman who could organize a household of 30 staff members without breaking a sweat was now gasping for breath, pointing toward the dining room like she'd witnessed something unholy. "She put something in the food," Maria repeated, her voice cracking. "I saw her. I watched her do it." Marco's blood turned to ice water. He'd built his reputation on reading people, on seeing threats before they materialized, on protecting what mattered. But the threat had been living under his own roof, sharing his bed, kissing his daughter goodnight. Isabella Benedetti was a woman who turned heads when she entered a room. Tall, elegant, with the kind of beauty that photographers begged to capture, and men wrote poetry about. She'd entered Marco's life 3 years ago at a charity gala, appearing like something from a dream he hadn't known he was having. Their courtship had been careful, cautious. Marco didn't trust easily, couldn't afford to in his line of work. But Isabella had been patient, understanding. She never asked about his business, never pushed for information, never demanded more than he was willing to give. She'd won over Sophia gradually, naturally, becoming not just a stepmother, but a friend, a confidant, a second parent who helped with homework and bandaged scraped knees, or so he'd thought. Now, as Marco stood frozen between the hallway and the dining room, Every interaction from the past 3 years played like a horror film in his mind. The stomach aches Sophia had been having, the nights she'd wake up crying, saying her tummy hurt but unable to explain how, the way she'd grown thinner despite eating her meals, the doctor visits that yielded no answers, no explanations, just reassurances that growing children sometimes had mysterious ailments. Marco had blamed stress. The life he led wasn't normal, and he'd worried that Sophia was picking up on the tension, the danger that lurked just outside their walls. He'd hired child psychologists, changed her diet, even considered moving to a different city where the shadows of his world couldn't reach her. But the shadows weren't outside. They'd been sitting at the breakfast table every morning. The dining room stretched before him like a stage set for a nightmare. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over antique furniture that had cost more than most people made in a year. Oil paintings of his ancestors watched from gilded frames, their eyes following him as he stepped across the threshold. Sophia sat at her usual spot, her small hands gripping a silver spoon that seemed too big for her fingers. Her dark hair was pulled back in the braids Marco had taught Isabella how to make, secured with ribbons the color of summer sky. She hummed a song from some cartoon, completely absorbed in the simple joy of lunch. Isabella stood behind her, one hand resting gently on Sophia's shoulder, the other holding a cloth napkin. Her smile was radiant, maternal, perfect, the picture of domestic bliss that would make any man grateful for the life he'd built. But Marco saw what he'd missed before, the way Isabella's fingers pressed just a little too firmly into Sophia's shoulder, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at his daughter, the way she positioned herself between Sophia and anyone who might interrupt their meals together. "Daddy!" Sophia's face lit up when she spotted him. "You're still here. Isabella made my favorite soup." The bowl sat in front of her, steam rising from its surface, cream of mushroom, Sophia's absolute favorite. The one thing that could make her eat when she felt sick. Isabella had learned to make it perfectly, had served it to Sophia dozens of times over the past year. Marco's eyes found Isabella's across the room. She held his gaze steadily, that same loving smile playing at her lips. But now he saw something else there, something cold and calculating that made his skin crawl. "Marco," she said, her voice as warm as honey, "I thought you'd left already. Sophia was just telling me about her art project for school." The normalcy of it all was what made it truly terrifying. This wasn't some dramatic confrontation from a movie. This was quiet, domestic, hidden in plain sight. Evil wearing the mask of motherhood. Poison disguised as love. Sophia lifted the spoon to her lips, completely trusting, completely innocent. And Marco knew that in the next few seconds, everything would change forever. Everything would change forever. "Sophia, stop." The words came out sharper than Marco intended. His daughter's spoon froze halfway to her mouth, soup dripping back into the bowl. Her eyes went wide with confusion. "Daddy? What's wrong?" Isabella's hand tightened on Sophia's shoulder. "Marco, you're scaring her. What's gotten into you?" But Marco was already moving, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. His hand closed around Sophia's wrist, gently but firmly pulling the spoon away from her lips. The silver clattered against the porcelain as it fell. "I need to see that," he said quietly. Isabella's mask began to slip, just for a moment, just at the edges. "See what?" "It's just soup, Marco. Sophia's soup that she loves. Then you won't mind if I taste it first." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Sophia seemed to sense that something fundamental had shifted in the room. Her small hand reached for her father's arm. "Daddy, you're acting weird. The soup tastes good. Isabella always makes it taste good." Those words hit Marco like a physical blow. Always. How many times had Isabella served this exact meal to his daughter? How many times had he watched Sophia eat it? Praised Isabella for being so attentive, so caring. Maria Santos appeared in the doorway, still pale but more composed now. Behind her stood 2 of Marco's security guards, Men who'd been instructed never to enter the family dining room unless specifically summoned. But Maria had summoned them. Maria, who understood the gravity of what she'd witnessed. "Tell me exactly what you saw," Marco said to Maria, his voice deadly calm. Isabella laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "This is ridiculous. You're going to believe the help over your own wife?" But Maria stepped forward, her chin raised despite the tremor in her voice. "I was polishing the silver in the adjacent room when I heard Mrs. Benedetti in the kitchen. She was speaking to someone on the phone. She said the doses were too small, that it needed to be stronger." Marco felt the world tilt sideways. "Go on." "I watched her through the service window. She took a small vial from her purse and emptied it into the soup pot. When she saw me watching, she smiled and put her finger to her lips, like it was our little secret." Sophia looked between the adults, her young mind struggling to process the tension crackling through the air. "What's a dose? What are you talking about?" Isabella's composure cracked completely. The loving stepmother vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You have no idea what you're interfering with, you ignorant woman." "Mrs. Benedetti," Maria continued, her voice growing stronger, "you told whoever was on that phone that the child would be dead within the month if you continued increasing the amount." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marco felt something inside his chest tear apart. Some fundamental belief in the order of the world. This woman, this person he'd brought into their home, into Sophia's life, had been slowly poisoning his daughter for months. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Isabella straightened, and for the first time since he'd known her, Marco saw who she really was. Not the grieving widow she'd claimed to be. Not the woman looking for a second chance at love. Something else entirely. "Because she was in the way," Isabella said simply. "Because as long as that child exists, I'll never truly have you. As long as she's alive, I'll always be second." Sophia began to cry, not understanding the words but feeling their weight. Marco picked her up, holding her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the rapid flutter of her heartbeat against his chest. "How long?" he asked. 6 months. Isabella replied with disturbing pride. "Small amounts at first, barely enough to notice, just enough to make her sick, to make you worried, to make you lean on me for support. But she's stronger than I expected, resilient, like her father." Marco's vision went red around the edges. 6 months of watching his daughter suffer. 6 months of doctor visits and sleepless nights and holding Sophia while she cried from pain he couldn't understand. 6 months of praising Isabella for her care and dedication. "The insurance policy," he said suddenly, the pieces clicking into place. Isabella smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Marco had ever seen. $2 million, plus inheritance rights to the estate, plus custody of your business interests if you were to die of grief after losing your precious daughter. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Poison Sophia slowly enough that her death would appear natural. A mysterious illness that doctors couldn't quite identify or treat. Marco would be devastated, vulnerable, dependent on Isabella for comfort. And if grief didn't kill him quickly enough, well, accidents happened all the time in his line of work. "You're insane," Marco breathed. "I'm practical," Isabella corrected. "I saw an opportunity and I took it. You think you're the only one who knows how to eliminate obstacles?" Sophia was sobbing now, clinging to her father with desperate strength. She didn't understand the words, but she understood that the woman who'd braided her hair and read her stories and tucked her into bed was something dangerous, something that wanted to hurt her. Marco's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. He glanced at it with one hand while holding Sophia with the other. The message was simple. "We need to talk. There's more you don't know. A friend." Isabella noticed his expression change. "Expecting someone, darling?" Before Marco could respond, the sound of car engines filled the air outside. Multiple vehicles, moving fast, coming up the long driveway. His security team would have identified them by now, would have called if there was a threat. unless the threat was already inside the house. Isabella's smile widened. I told you there was more you didn't know. The dining room windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and gunfire. Marco threw himself over Sophia, shielding her with his body as bullets tore through the air where they'd been standing. When the shooting stopped, the silence was absolute. Marco raised his head cautiously. Isabella was gone, simply vanished, as if she'd never been there at all. Sophia was unconscious in his arms. Whether from shock or something else, he couldn't tell. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Maria lay crumpled near the doorway, blood pooling beneath her still form. And standing in the shattered remains of the window was a figure Marco recognized, but had never expected to see in his home. His brother, dead for 15 years. Very much alive. Hello, Marco, the ghost said. We need to talk. To talk. The man standing in the destroyed window frame looked exactly as Marco remembered him. Same dark eyes, same crooked smile, same scar running from his left ear to his jaw, a memento from their father's belt when they were children. Except Antonio Benedetti had been buried 15 years ago after a car bomb meant for Marco had taken the wrong target. You look like you've seen a ghost, Antonio said, stepping carefully through the shattered glass. His voice carried the same rough edge Marco remembered, the same slight rasp from too many cigarettes and too much whiskey. Marco didn't lower Sophia, didn't move from his protective crouch. His mind raced through possibilities, explanations, anything that made sense. Hallucinations brought on by stress, a look-alike sent by enemies, some elaborate psychological warfare designed to break him. But the way Antonio moved, the way he favored his left leg from an old gunshot wound, the way his eyes swept the room with tactical precision, these weren't things an imposter could fake. Antonio died in 2009, Marco said carefully. Antonio disappeared in 2009. His brother corrected, moving closer. There's a difference. Sophia stirred in Marco's arms, her eyelids fluttering. Whatever Isabella had given her was wearing off, but slowly. Her small hand gripped Marco's shirt with unconscious desperation. The car bomb, Marco pressed. I identified the body myself. Antonio's laugh was bitter. You identified what was left after dental records were switched and DNA samples were contaminated. Amazing what money can buy when you know the right people. More pieces of the impossible puzzle clicked into place. The funeral had been closed casket. The explosion had been devastating, leaving little for identification. Marco had been so consumed with grief and rage that he'd never questioned the official findings. Why? The word came out raw, torn from somewhere deep in Marco's chest. Because someone wanted me dead, and I wasn't ready to die. Antonio knelt beside Maria's still form, checking for a pulse with professional efficiency. She's alive. Unconscious, but breathing steady. Relief flooded through Marco. Maria had saved Sophia's life. She deserved to survive this nightmare. The men outside, Marco said. Yours? Mine now. They used to work for our mutual friend Isabella. Antonio's smile was sharp as a blade. Turns out she's been playing a much longer game than either of us realized. Sophia's eyes opened fully, focusing on her father's face with confused recognition. Daddy? My head hurts. I know, baby. We're going to make it better. Marco brushed hair from her forehead, checking her pupils. They were responsive but dilated. Can you tell me how you feel? Sleepy and sick, like that time I had the flu. Sophia's gaze wandered to Antonio, and she tilted her head with childish curiosity. Who's that man? He looks like you. The innocence of the question hit both brothers like a physical blow. This child had never known she had an uncle, had never heard stories about the man who'd taught Marco to ride a bike and throw a punch and read people's intentions in their eyes. That's Uncle Antonio, Marco said softly. He's been away for a very long time. Antonio's expression softened as he looked at Sophia. Hello, little one. You're even prettier than your pictures. What pictures? Marco asked sharply. The ones Isabella sent me every month for the past 2 years. The revelation hit like ice water. Isabella hadn't just been planning Sophia's death. She'd been documenting it, providing updates to someone who was supposed to be dead. She hired you, Marco realized. She tried to. Antonio moved to the window, scanning the grounds outside. Contacted me through intermediaries 18 months ago. Said she had a job that required my particular skills and my personal motivation. Which was? Eliminating the Benedetti bloodline. Marco's grip tightened on Sophia. She wanted you to kill us both. Eventually. But first, she wanted to see you suffer. Losing Sophia would break you, she said. Make you careless. Vulnerable. Then I was supposed to finish what the car bomb started. Sophia was listening with the intense focus that children bring to adult conversations they don't quite understand. Her small hand reached up to touch Marco's face. Daddy, you look scared. Marco forced his expression into something resembling calm. Just surprised, sweetheart. Good surprises and bad surprises all at once. Antonio approached slowly, his hands visible and empty. She underestimated two things. First, how much I've changed in 15 years. Second, how much I still care about family. Family. Marco tasted the word like poison. You let me believe you were dead. I let everyone believe I was dead. It was the only way to stay alive long enough to find out who wanted me gone and why. Antonio's eyes hardened. Turns out it wasn't who I thought. Isabella. Isabella was just the latest player. This goes back much further, Marco. Back to when we were kids. Back to decisions our father made before we were born. Sophia yawned, her body still fighting whatever drug Isabella had given her. I'm tired, Daddy. Can we go home now? We are home, baby. No, Sophia said, with the clarity that sometimes comes to children in crisis. This doesn't feel like home anymore. She was right. The dining room where they'd shared countless meals was destroyed. The windows that had framed peaceful views of gardens and fountain were jagged wounds, letting in cold air and the smell of gunpowder. The table where Sophia had done homework and drawn pictures was overturned. Her soup bowl shattered on the marble floor. Home was supposed to be safe. Home was supposed to be where monsters couldn't reach you. Tell me about the poison, Marco said to Antonio. Slow acting. Designed to accumulate in the system over time. Small doses would cause the symptoms Sophia's been having. Nausea, fatigue, abdominal pain. Larger doses would simulate organ failure. How do we reverse it? Already handled. The medical team outside has chelation therapy ready to begin immediately. She'll need monitoring for the next 72 hours, but full recovery is expected. Marco felt tears he hadn't realized were forming. You saved her. We saved her. If you hadn't stopped her from eating today, if your maid hadn't spoken up, if you hadn't trusted your instincts over your emotions, Sophia would be dead within the week. The weight of how close. They'd come crashed over Marco like a wave. 6 months of slow poisoning. 6 months of watching his daughter suffer while praising the woman who was killing her. 6 months of being played by someone who'd shared his bed and his secrets and his trust. Where is Isabella now? Antonio's smile was predatory. Gone, but not far. She thinks she's won, thinks you're dead or dying in that gunfire. She's probably already making calls to consolidate power, to claim widows' rights to your empire. Let her think that. Exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Sophia's breathing had evened out, and she seemed to be falling into natural sleep, rather than drug-induced unconsciousness. Marco stood carefully, his daughter secure in his arms. The medical team, he said, waiting in the East Wing. Dr. Helena Vasquez, you remember her? Treated your gunshot wound 3 years ago. Marco nodded. Dr. Vasquez was discreet, competent, and had no love for people who hurt children. What about the authorities? What authorities? As far as anyone knows, this was a gas explosion. Tragic accident. The Benedetti family is in seclusion while they grieve and recover. And Isabella? Antonio's expression went cold. Isabella Mendoza Santos is about to learn what happens when you threaten a Benedetti child. The name hit Marco like a physical blow. Mendoza Santos. He knew that name. Had heard it whispered in the same breath as words like betrayal and revenge and blood debt. The Mendoza family. Marco breathed. Our father's old enemies. Isabella is Carlos Mendoza's daughter. This isn't about love or money or even murder, Marco. This is about a debt that's been collecting interest for 30 years. Sophia stirred, murmuring something in her sleep. Marco bent his head to listen. I dreamed about butterflies, she whispered without opening her eyes. They were all different colors, but they were flying away from something dark. Marco's chest tightened. Even in sleep, even drugged, his daughter's mind was processing the danger she'd been in. The butterflies got away, didn't they? Some of them did. The pretty blue ones made it to the safe place. Good. That's good, baby. Antonio watched this exchange with something like wonder. She's strong, stronger than Isabella counted on. She gets that from her mother and her father. The brothers looked at each other across 15 years of assumed death and genuine grief. There would be time later for explanations, for recriminations, for the 1,000 questions that needed answers. Right now, Sophia needed medical attention, and Isabella needed to be stopped before she realized her plan had failed. The team outside, Marco said. How many? 12, all former military, all with personal reasons to hate the Mendoza family. Personal reasons? Antonio's jaw tightened. Isabella isn't the only one who's been playing a long game. The Mendoza family has been systematically destroying everyone connected to our father's organization. Wives, children, grandparents, anyone who carried Benedetti blood or loyalty. How many? 17 families over 15 years. Always made to look like accidents or natural causes. Always with just enough time between incidents to avoid patterns. The scope of it was staggering. A multi-generational war disguised as random tragedy. Marco had been so focused on building his own empire, protecting his own family, that he'd missed the larger picture. Why Sophia? Why now? Because you're the last one, Marco. The last direct male heir. With you and Sophia dead, the Benedetti name dies too. Isabella inherits everything, liquidates the assets, and disappears with enough money to fund the Mendoza family's operations for decades. Sophia opened her eyes, fully awake now despite the lingering effects of whatever she'd ingested. Daddy, I heard loud noises, like fireworks, but scary. I know, sweetheart. Some bad people were trying to hurt us, but they're gone now. Is Isabella a bad person? The question was so simple, so direct, that Marco found himself struggling for an answer. How do you explain betrayal to a child? How do you tell them that the person who kissed their scraped knees and sang them to sleep was slowly poisoning them? Yes, he said finally. Isabella is a very bad person who was pretending to be good. Sophia nodded solemnly. I thought so. She always smiled too much when you weren't looking. The observation from an 8-year-old child cut deeper than any accusation from an adult could have. Sophia had seen what Marco had missed, what his love and trust had blinded him to. Children possessed an honesty that adults learned to suppress, an ability to sense danger that civilization hadn't yet taught them to ignore. She did smile too much, Antonio agreed quietly. Predators often do. They overcompensate, trying to appear more trustworthy than genuine people need to. Marco carried Sophia toward the door, but she twisted in his arms to look back at the destruction. Will we fix it? Will we make it pretty again? We'll make something better, Marco promised. Something safer. As they moved through the hallway, Sophia's questions continued with the relentless curiosity that had always defined her. Uncle Antonio, why were you away for so long? Daddy has pictures of you, but he gets sad when he looks at them. Antonio glanced at Marco, measuring his response carefully. Sometimes adults have to go away to protect the people they love, even when it hurts. Even when it means missing birthdays and holidays and watching little girls grow up. That's sad, Sophia said simply. Yes, it is. They reached the East Wing, where Dr. Vasquez waited with equipment that looked more suited to a hospital than a private home. The doctor's silver hair was pulled back in a practical bun, her dark eyes sharp with concern and professional focus. How is she responding? Dr. Vasquez asked, immediately beginning her examination. Alert, Coherent, asking questions, Marco reported, but she says she feels sick and sleepy. The doctor's hands were gentle as she checked Sophia's pulse, her pupils, her reflexes. The symptoms are consistent with chronic low-level poisoning. We'll need blood work to determine exactly what compounds were used, but the treatment protocol can begin immediately. Sophia submitted to the examination with remarkable calm, watching everything with wide eyes. Are you going to make me better? That's the plan, little one. You've been very brave. Daddy says brave people speak up when something's wrong. Maria was brave today. Dr. Vasquez looked up sharply. Maria Santos? Is she injured? Unconscious, but stable, Antonio reported. She'll need attention once Sophia is settled. As the doctor worked, preparing IV lines and medications, Sophia's attention drifted to the windows. Daddy, why are there so many men outside? They have guns. Marco followed her gaze. Antonio's team had positioned themselves strategically around the grounds. Professional soldiers who moved with purpose and precision. They're here to keep us safe while Dr. Vasquez helps you feel better. From Isabella? The name hung in the air like a curse. Marco nodded slowly. From Isabella and anyone else who might want to hurt our family. Good, Sophia said with startling firmness. I don't want her to come back. She made me feel sick, but she pretended she didn't know why. Dr. Vasquez inserted the IV with practiced skill, Sophia barely flinching at the needle. This medicine will help your body get rid of anything that shouldn't be there. You might feel a little strange at first, but then you should start feeling much better. As the chelation therapy began, Sophia's eyelids grew heavy again, but this time it was natural exhaustion rather than chemical sedation. Marco settled into a chair beside her bed, unwilling to let her out of his sight. Antonio remained standing, his attention divided between his niece and the tactical situation developing outside. Isabella's made her first mistake, he said quietly. Which is? She stopped running. My sources say she's holed up in a warehouse complex about 20 miles north. She thinks you're dead, thinks she's won, so she's making calls instead of disappearing. Marco's jaw tightened. What kind of calls? To banks, to lawyers, to her father's old network. She's trying to claim widow's rights to your assets. But she's also coordinating something bigger. The other families. The surviving members of the 17 families she helped destroy. She's been keeping them alive, Marco. Prisoners, leverage, insurance policies. If anyone came looking for revenge, she could threaten their loved ones. The scope of Isabella's operation was becoming clearer, and it was far more extensive than a simple murder plot. She'd been running a sophisticated network of kidnapping, extortion, and assassination, using the Benedetti Empire as her ultimate target. How many people are we talking about? At least 30, maybe more. Children, spouses, elderly parents, anyone whose death would have drawn attention if it happened immediately after their family member's elimination. Sophia stirred, her small hand reaching for Marco's. Daddy, I had another dream. About the butterflies. Tell me about it. They weren't just flying away from something dark. They were leading other butterflies to safety. The blue ones knew where the safe place was. Marco squeezed her hand gently. That's a very good dream. Dr. Vasquez checked her monitors, satisfaction evident in her expression. Her body's responding well to treatment. The poison levels are already dropping. How long before she's completely clear? 72 hours for complete elimination, Dr. Vasquez replied, but she'll be feeling much stronger within the next 12 hours. 3 days later, Sophia was running through the gardens again, chasing actual butterflies with the boundless energy of a child who'd been given back her life. The antidote had worked perfectly, purging every trace of Isabella's poison from her small body. Antonio's team had found the warehouse. Inside, they'd discovered not just Isabella, but a network that stretched across 3 countries. 37 people were freed that night. Sons, daughters, parents who'd been presumed dead for years. The reunion videos would make grown men cry. Isabella Mendoza Santos disappeared into a federal facility where she would spend the rest of her life answering for crimes that spanned decades. Her father's vendetta had finally been put to rest, but at a cost that could never be fully calculated. Maria Santos recovered completely and was promoted to head of security. Her courage had saved not just Sofia, but dozens of other families. Sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones nobody notices. As Marco watched Sofia play in the garden, Antonio approached quietly. "She's remarkable," his brother said. "She sees things adults miss." "She always has," Marco replied. "I just wish I'd listened sooner." The brothers stood together in comfortable silence, two men who'd found each other again through the worst kind of crisis. Family, Marco had learned, wasn't just about blood. It was about who showed up when everything fell apart. Sofia ran toward them, breathless and laughing, her arms full of wildflowers. "Daddy, look! I caught a butterfly. But then I let it go because Uncle Antonio said they're happier when they're free." Marco knelt to her level, accepting the bouquet with the solemnity it deserved. "That was very wise, Princess. Are we safe now?" she asked, the question that had haunted them all. Marco looked at his daughter, at his brother, at the home they'd rebuilt from ashes and betrayal. Safety wasn't a destination. It was a choice made every single day, a commitment to paying attention, to listening to the quiet voices that spoke truth in a world full of beautiful lies. "Yes," he said simply, "we're safe now." Sometimes the most dangerous threats come wrapped in love letters and bedtime stories. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones we should fear. But sometimes, just sometimes, courage speaks up in time, and the butterflies find their way to safety.